Hello and welcome back to Clownfish TV. It is me, Geeky Sparkles, and it's just me for this video because Kneon is elsewhere. So it sounds like The View is not having a very good time of it. The other day, Whoopi Goldberg was having a meltdown because, their name appeared in the Epstein list that are being, released, and they were like, shocker, just because your name's on the list doesn't mean you did something wrong. So they had to, admit that. But now the FCC and Brendan Carr is kind of initiating enforcement proceedings due to equal time rules and saying that they don't really qualify as a bona fide news source, he's arguing. So I'll explain all this in a minute. Before we get into it any further, please like and subscribe. If you do, I'll give you a woohoo, and we're going to talk about this. So the other day, anybody who watches The View knows The View definitely has a certain political leaning. The hosts always are constantly going about politics. They're constantly making digs. There was a time where they were trying to say that they weren't having, right-leaning people on because they were too afraid of them to come on the show. A bunch of people came out and said, no, I'd be happy to come on the show, when you didn't hear anything else about that. They're just known for having political leanings. And when you're like getting yourself listed as a bona fide news source, it means that you're not partisan. You're just talking about news for news sake. But there's definitely partisan leanings here with this show. And I think that's coming to bite them in the ass. But it was funny because they went on forever. Like there's countless, I saw it shared on X. They had all these clips of them. You need to release the files. You need to release the names. Why are you not releasing the names? Are you afraid of something? You're not releasing the names. So they released the names from the Epstein file. And because don't you know, if you're on the list, you're guilty, until Whoopi Goldberg's name came out on the list. Because the information in these files are not just names, people who did things that were on the island. They're just any connection through people did searches, or people were talking about them in any way, or they were brought up. In her case, I guess it was over needing a plane somewhere, and stuff like that. It wasn't because they themselves did something wrong. So a lot of people were listed on these information and on these files that weren't involved in the really bad things that were happening on the island. And Whoopi Goldberg got caught up in this. So it's interesting how their entire tone about the files change when, it impacts one of them. And she talked about how her name was mentioned. And she said that, they talked about it was a plane thing. They were trying to get her a plane. And Joy Behar. So in other words, anyone could be on the list. Yeah, Joy. That's exactly what this means. Just because Trump's name was featured 38,000 times doesn't mean that meant he was on the island. It might mean that he was. It doesn't mean necessarily that he was. It's just that he was mentioned all these times. There's other people that are coming up with a lot of mentions that weren't there. And there's people that were there that didn't do anything. So it's like, it's not as cut and dry as they kept presenting it. And they were all about, throw people under the bus until one of them showed up on the list. So it's just interesting to me. And follow this with now, the FCC has initiated enforcement proceedings over The View's equal time rules. Now, go back a little further. We have the whole thing with CBS, and you have Colbert saying that, he was told that he couldn't air the one guy's interview. And CBS is like, no, we just told you that if you do that, you have to, release like an interview with somebody else as well for the equal time rules. And he's trying to fight that and say that he was being censored when that wasn't the case. But now The View, they're coming after them. And apparently Brendan Carr said, he said on Fox's The Ingram Angle that they were going to do this. He said, Disney has a program called The View, and they've been asserting the position that The View is what is known as a bona fide news in the statute. And I'll explain that in a minute. If you are bona fide news, you don't have to give candidates equal airtime. But Disney and The View have not established that the program is, in fact, bona fide news. We've started enforcing proceedings, taking a look at that. And again, we're going to hold broadcasters accountable. So bona fide news, basically, it applies to a lot of things, that if you are mostly just covering news that is newsworthy, but you're not taking a partisan side, you're like considered bona fide news. A lot of talk shows, late night shows have been, kind of exempted and allowed to be part of the bona fide news aspect since like the 90s when Jay Leno, I think it was Jay Leno, asked them to exempt his show. So it's kind of status quo now that a lot of these shows aren't considered, because they haven't been super like, hey, by the way, we're very, very partisan. They have had some, but not to the level they've had in recent years. So they're trying to argue, Disney tries to argue that they're bona fide news. They also try to argue it's a talk show, even though it's part of ABC News. So it's technically a news show. Also, if anybody's watched The View, saying they're trying to stay out of being out of partisanship that's not related to news stories is, they definitely don't do that. There's definitely partisanship in that show. And again, if it wasn't tied to, the news, it might not be such a big deal. He goes on to say down here, let me find it. He's talking about CBS in the interview. The days that these legacy media broadcasters get to decide what we can say, what we can think, who we can vote for or over. I think President Trump played a key role in just smashing the facade that they still get to decide the narrative here. And, I think this can be taken too far easily. I do think that, if it is a fine line. It's like, are you just doing this because you're mad, because you're not getting equal time? But we've also seen the media deliberately go out of the way to exclude one side of the story for the other side of the story. And it's an ongoing issue that people don't trust the news anymore, and they don't trust the mainstream media anymore. A lot of these shows that you would think would be considered news sources that would be under this FCC regulatory guidelines are, try to list themselves as bona fides, and that's not really what they are. I mean, I did an article on this, and I even had this is something that Joy Behar said. They're trying to say they're nonpartisan, but Joy Behar said, I wouldn't even talking about a MAGA supporter, I wouldn't even let him give me the Heimlich maneuver. That's how little I feel about people. I don't. People who believe that stuff, they're just so disregarding everything that he has said and done, trashing servicemen, trashing John McCain, speaking of women, being held liable for sexual assault. It means you are in agreement with that. How can I be in a relationship with you? I cannot. If you're just watching any episode of The View, for the most part, there is always some partisan dig on that show. But then again, I'm going to argue the flip side is they have their audience. All right. They're pandering to a certain audience. They have their audience. People that are going to listen to them are going to listen to anybody else that's talking about the same thing. And The View didn't start out this way. The View actually was a show about different viewpoints. It did have people of different political leanings, but politics wasn't one of their main focuses. It was about lifestyle news and Hollywood gossip and, girl talk and stuff like that. That's how it was back in the day. And it's morphed into, this giant far leftist show. But putting censorship on it isn't really going to change anything because, like I said, the audience is their audience. And just like any audience is going to listen to, Gutfeld or something, is probably going to have different leanings. The only problem they have is that they are under the NBC News banner, and they keep listing themselves as that they're basically talking about news stories, but they just keep the partisanship out of it is where this is coming into. So I don't know. People are mad about it. I think it's just I don't want to say overreach because I agree that it's getting out of control with the amount of, it's definitely leaning one way only, and other people don't get a chance. Because if you control the media and you control the microphone and only one side ever gets to speak, then no one ever can hear from the other side. And that is a problem. And that's kind of what they've been trying to do. So I get where he's coming from, but I'm also I can get where they're arguing it's a talk show. Either way, The View is just trash. I think most people know The View is just trash, but I think it's absolutely hilarious that they were all like, Epstein Files, everybody on there's trash, and Trump's on there, and all these bad people. Do you release it? If you have nothing to hide, release it. Release it until Whoopi Goldberg was on the list. And then as soon as Whoopi Goldberg was on the list, oh shit, you know what? Just because you're on a list doesn't mean you did something bad. And it turned out she didn't do anything bad. She was just mentioned about some things regarding a plane. And it had nothing to do with Epstein Island. She had nothing to do with him. She wasn't over there. Those kind of things. But it's just funny that this narrative that, everybody on that list is guilty, which is they've been pushing. It could bite you in the ass when one of you show up on the list. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with The View. It's like they keep running with these partisan narratives instead of what's fact-based, which is, just because you're on the information doesn't mean you did something wrong. And they keep wanting to run with that until it bites them in the ass. And then when it bites them in the ass, then they're like, oh, well, that doesn't mean anything. Anybody could be on that list, I guess. But by the way, Trump was named 38,000 times. It's just the hypocrisy is unbelievable. But I don't think anybody expects anything different from The View either. Same with the late night talk shows. So I don't know where this is going to go. Disney hasn't commented yet. It's probably going to go nowhere, to be honest with you. We'll see what happens. I know they're cracking down on this. Like, we have the whole, it's all tied to like the Colbert thing. He mentioned that too in the article here in his interview. He said that CBS was very clear that Colbert could run the interview that he wanted with a political candidate. They just said you may have to comply with equal time because they would fall under that apparently, which could have meant potentially giving airtime to Jasmine Crockett or another candidate. But instead of doing that, they claimed that they were all victims, and this was all about political candidate trying to get attention and clicks. And the news media ran with it like lemmings. They just ate it up, which they do in lockstep. We've pointed that out many, many times. So we're going to see what happens. They're going to start cracking down with the FCC. Oh, I also want to mention something else real quick before we end this video. The media keeps spinning it like it's this new thing and that the FCC is doing all stuff under Trump and it's this equal time thing's just a bunch of shit and it's all under Trump. This actually tracks back to laws from the 1940s. It's been in place for a long time. Like I said, Jay Leno got exempted out as bona fide for his late night show back in the 90s. And all these other talk shows have kind of fallen under that as well, just automatically, because we weren't as polarized politically as it's been lately. So they're going to have to crack down on it because it's getting out of control. But it's funny because they keep acting like it's just Trump and it's this new rule. But it's not a new rule. It's actually been in place for a long time. It's just that these places have gotten out of control with pushing the boundaries about what it means to have that bona fide designation. So anyway, please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.